Today I am taking a look at my personal favorite video game of all time, Pokémon Emerald. So when I do these videos, the general concept is that I take a look at games with a critical eye and discuss the positive aspects, the negative aspects, how well a game holds up, and stuff of that nature. This video is going to be a little bit different. As I've already said, this game is my all-time favorite. Pokémon Emerald is the game I grew up playing, the game that got me into Pokémon, and the game I have the fondest memories of. So part of the issue is I don't know how unbiased I can be in a full review, so just keep that in mind. And this is the only game I can feel comfortable saying that about. But I still really wanted to explore this game, the history I've had with this game, and talk about what I love most about it. So I'll do my best to be critical, but this is my favorite game of all time, so keep that in mind. So for context, I was born in the year 1998, which was the year Pokémon Yellow released in Japan and Pokémon Red and Blue released in North America. So I personally just missed the boat on the original Pokémon craze of the 90s kids. Then in 2005, Pokémon Emerald released in the United States, and I was the perfect age for my very first Pokémon game. My grandma got me this game Christmas that year, and I couldn't have been more excited. I had seen the game on the Walmart shelves, and the price was far more than my little 6-year-old self could even imagine. So Christmas morning, I started up Pokémon Emerald for the first time on my SpongeBob Game Boy, and began my first Pokémon game. Now, when I was a kid, as you would probably expect, I just skipped all the dialogue and used my starter throughout the entirety of the game. By the end of the game, I had a level 100 Sceptile, and the rest of my team were level 5 Zigzagoons, but I didn't care. I would still catch every Pokemon that I saw. This was a brand new universe for me. I had never seen Heracross or Metagross or Gyarados before, and every encounter was beyond exciting. Not to be depressing, but I'm not sure I'll ever experience that kind of childhood joy and excitement again. I remember just leveling up random Pokemon to see if they would evolve. Remember, I had absolutely no idea and just wanted to see if they could. At one point, I leveled up a Dusclops to level 70 because I wanted to see if it could evolve again. Remember, this was before Gen 4. There's something amazing about childhood wonder because let me tell you, I wouldn't do that nowadays. At some point later, after completing the Pokemon League a few times and filling up the majority of the Pokedex, I ended up asking my dad to print out the entire guide from some wiki so that I could complete the Pokedex. It was a lot of pages, he wasn't happy. I still remember completing it as a child. It was my greatest accomplishment. And honestly, as an adult, it's probably still my greatest accomplishment. There are so many more memories that I could share with you, but I recognize you may not be here for that. So I recently replayed Pokemon Emerald, and it has definitely aged a bit, but in my opinion, it's still one of the best Pokemon games you can play. Let's start with the gameplay of Pokemon Emerald. Now, if you are one of the 4 living humans that hasn't played Pokemon, then let me explain. Pokemon is a game where you catch, battle, and train monsters. You have a team of 6 Pokemon, and each Pokemon has a predetermined typing. The main game involves you leaving your hometown and training up Pokemon you catch to challenge what are called gym leaders, which are just challenging trainers you periodically encounter. All of this is to make your way to become champion of the region, or number 1. The other part of the game involves battling Team Magma and Team Aqua, and they are villains of the story who have their own evil objectives that I'll get into in a bit. Now, at the time, the gameplay was still the revolutionary monster battling turn-based gameplay that we had learned to love from previous games. At this point, it's fairly common knowledge what Pokemon games are, but at this time, it was still fairly new and fresh. The animations really used the power of the Game Boy Advance to its fullest, and the game was challenging. Now, it wasn't Final Fantasy levels of difficult where you would always have to grind between bosses to make sure you had a chance, but it took thought and consideration before each battle. My biggest complaint with the new Pokemon games is how easy they are. Emerald would keep you on your toes, and that was so enjoyable. Even as an adult, I have to make sure to keep up with my grinding because Emerald will catch you off guard. I was playing the game, and the second Gym Leader Brawly defeated me a couple times. I was honestly surprised. Now, of course, this game is 20 years old, so there are some aged elements to the game that people that play now will notice. For example, the game is slow. And not in performance, but in gameplay. Your character can't run inside buildings, animations can feel long and drawn out, and health bars can, for whatever reason, lower at a snail's pace. Especially if the Pokemon has lots of HP. Also, wild encounters take significantly longer to get through as opposed to the newer games. Now, this is all due to the age of the game. Nowadays, everyone is expecting quick and snappy gameplay. I mean, look at a game like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy from 20 years ago. Those games took their time. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with this, it's just something to keep in mind. The best thing Pokémon Emerald does, in my opinion, is with the wide variety of fantastic Pokémon to catch and evolve. The third generation had a whopping 135 new Pokémon, and they were fantastic additions. They weren't over-the-top Digimon-style monsters, but Game Freak clearly experimented and made designs that were a little bit more interesting than Gen 1 and 2. No hate, I love Gen 1 and Gen 2, but it was nice to have a little bit more spice. Emerald, like I said, also made the sprites of these new Pokemon look amazing. Something I don't think Emerald got enough love for was the vibrant colors seen through each design. The reds were sharp and perfectly contrasted, the blues, yellows, greens. It's candy for the eyes, and honestly, I don't think Pokemon has ever looked as good as it did at this time. Maybe it's something about the simplistic 2D sprites, or maybe it's my own nostalgia, but I think these Pokemon look flat out really good. I mean, let's look at the sharp contrast between Groudon and Kyogre, or Blaziken and Swampert. Plus, Emerald now has actual shading, and the Pokemon do little animations when coming out of their Pokeballs. Game Freak really put effort into this game, and I can tell. Emerald and its predecessors Ruby and Sapphire have revolutionized the Pokemon games and added fundamental components that are still beloved to this day. Let's talk about maybe the biggest change, and that is abilities. It's hard to imagine a Pokemon game without abilities, because they fundamentally change the way you battle. I mean, look at Slacking, for example. This Pokemon wouldn't have worked without abilities, because the trade-offs for its massive stats is its ability Truant, that only allows it to act every other turn. It adds so many more layers to the game and has become a universally loved addition. Another great addition to this game is double battles. And these are what they sound like. 2 Pokemon versus 2 Pokemon, and similar to the addition of abilities, while sounding fairly simple at a first glance, they add a complex new and most importantly fun layer to the game. And of course, there are tons of other additions and changes that I could discuss, but this video would be hours long. Just know that Game Freak knocked it out of the park, and this generation was a vital step forward for the franchise. Now let's talk about the controversial aspect of this game and this whole generation, the Hoenn region. Now, I personally like this region, but I can absolutely see why people wouldn't like it. The second half of the game is basically just water, and it can get annoying. I'm not entirely sure what Game Freak's reason for this was, but the game definitely feels a bit watered down.
Oh, you suck!
And with this, the second half of the game leans significantly more towards water Pokemon, and it can knock the balance off a bit. Choosing a team of grass and electric can steamroll you through the second half, while having a fire-heavy team feels a bit unfair. But while the second half of the game is a bit heavy on the water, the first half has what I would argue is the most diverse and interesting environment of any Pokemon game. We go from the grassy Petalburg Forest to the beaches of Dewford, to the bustling city of Mauville, to the fiery Lava Ridge. I loved how each city had its own identity. Emerald also has one of the coolest cities in any Pokemon game, being Fall Arbor Town, where ash is constantly falling from the sky and stepping in grass removes the ash. It's unique and a joy to see the creativity Pokemon put into these locations. And of course I have to talk about the music of this game. Each city has its own different jingle to it, it's all memorable, and it's one of the reasons I have so much nostalgia for this game. Of course, this is one of those aspects I talked about at the beginning where I'm probably a little bit biased, but I really think the music is some of the best in all of Pokemon. I'd also like to talk about the story of Pokemon Emerald and the villain groups you encounter. So I'm one of those people that don't really care if Pokemon has a good story. I recognize Pokemon isn't intended to be a story-heavy game, and so I'm not disappointed if the story is lackluster, but Pokemon Emerald actually has a fairly decent story. In general, Team Magma and Team Aqua are both trying to utilize the power of Groudon and Kyogre to take over the world. It's a fairly standard story, but it's engaging enough to keep me wondering, and for a Pokemon game, it's a nice addition. Both Archie and Maxie are great villains, and while not even close to being as good as Giovanni from the original games, they have a charismatic personality and great additions to the story. So those are my thoughts and experiences with Pokemon Emerald. This is my favorite game of all time, and I think this game is a testament to Game Freak's abilities to make a fantastic game. This game is what got me into my favorite game franchise of all time. It has led me to watch the show, collect the cards, play all the games. I don't think there will be a game I feel the same level of passion and nostalgia for than Pokémon Emerald. And if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend giving it a try. So thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace!